Hello and welcome to episode number 15 of the For All That podcast. Joining Michael and I this week is a woman which many of you will have, I'm sure, read and heard from before, Kate Higgins, the Burdz, a commentator on a range of different Scottish affairs who's become quite a familiar figure on our airwaves and on our screens. Thank you for coming on, Kate.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking me, Andrew.
You're very welcome. And as ever, it's myself, Andrew Tickell, and Michael Greenwell, here to discuss what's been going on this week in Scottish politics. How are you getting on, Michael?
I'm feeling AAA plus. How about you?
I'm more of an AA man myself. I'm more of a battery, as I require. And that's a very nice intro to one of the dominant things which has come out, in fact, just this weekend, which is about Moody's rating down of the UK from a AAA rating in terms of its likelihood to pay its sovereign debt back to an AA1, I believe, rating, which means that it's slightly less likely that the UK state is going to be able to pay its debts. I wonder, Michael, what did you think about that? I know you're not an economist yourself in particular, and for me, these ratings are fairly bamboozling in terms of what they might signify economically, but I wonder what you made of it.
It seems that, economically speaking, it doesn't actually matter that much. The creditors aren't too likely to be fussed about it a great deal, and there's always a get out in that the Bank of England can print as much money as it wants to kind of make up any shortfall. But I think it's more interesting politically, because the possibility that this might happen to an independent Scotland was trumpeted as disaster. It's the end of the world. It's Mayan economics, but then all of a sudden it's happened to Britain, but it's not that big a deal. So if it had happened to Scotland, would it be such a big deal or not? I mean, it's very strange. And I think a Labour MP said something very strange about whatever it will be for Britain, it would be worse for Scotland. But this is the point, we come to sort of scare stories again. And maybe that's all this has been. And it's been another scare story that's just gone belly up for them. I don't know. What do you think, Kate?
Yeah, but bizarrely, Danny Alexander was on Good Morning Scotland this morning and managed, in the space of a couple of sentences, to say that while this would be devastating for an independent Scotland, actually for the UK it was merely disappointing, which, they're all over the place on it, basically, politically. I think you're right, Michael, in that it doesn't matter too much economically, and it seems like the downgrade appears to have been because of the low growth prospects, which is worrying in the medium term to the long term in terms of our prospects, because that's jobs, that's local businesses, that impacts on families and individuals. But I think in terms of where it does matter is it's mood music, isn't it? It doesn't look good in terms of the UK economy, and the biggest loser of all out of it is George Osborne, the Chancellor, because he set this as his kind of litmus test that it was really important to hold on to our gold equivalent of our credit rating, and I don't know how much longer he can stay on in the role of Chancellor, given the amount of gaffes that he's made, but also just that everything that he touches turns to mud.
I heard that one of the reasons for the downgrading was actually that one of the people from those organisations actually met him.
And you mean we escaped only to AA1 and not B-?
That's a vote of confidence in many measures. I've never had my own personality rated so highly as AAE1. So, maybe I'll be jealous of Geordie on this basis. I think that's right, though. I think you must be right, both of you there, about the main damage this will do is to George Osborne individually. And as you said, Michael, several economists have said, well, actually, this re-rating is not based on any new magic insight into the UK economy. It isn't really based on any evidence that we don't already have. We all know that economically we are in a bad way in Britain. And this simply reflects that, arguably, rather than adding significantly to the sense of that fundamentally unemployment is bad and that growth isn't improving, which is a big worry. And I'm sure, actually, this just raises interesting questions too, though, I suppose, for the Labour Party, whose line has been pretty constant in credit to them, but pretty constantly quite strange, which is that the cuts are too fast and too deep, but the cuts that are being imposed by the the Liberal Tory coalition still have to be made in time, I suppose, and maybe slightly more shallow in their bite. But fundamentally, I suppose it doesn't really vindicate their policies either. So while George may be rather damaged by this, I don't see that it necessarily strengthens the Labour Party's hand very substantially politically. I don't know if, Kate, that's something which has struck you, or if you agree with that kind of sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ed Balls has done quite a good job in trying to come up with an alternative package of measures to kickstart the economy, I think is the phrase that's been used. But in reality, if you look at the fact that Labour were all over the benefit uprating bill like a rash and, really opposing the breaking of the link between increasing benefits on an annual basis. It used to be related to the consumer price index, and now it's been changed. But when they were actually pushed to say, well, will you reinstate this if you're elected in 2015, they wouldn't commit to that. So there's a level of illiteracy about what they are doing and kind of opportunistic oppositionalism, if you like. But to be fair to Ed Balls, some of these measures are about growth in terms of things like cutting VAT. And so whether or not, if they had been in charge of the economy and they had slowed down the cuts and were taking measures to boost growth, we would have had this down rating. Who knows? I think as well what's interesting in terms of Angus MacLeod from the Times this morning was saying that clearly this is advantageous for the SNP, but they have to kind of canny with it. But I just wonder why we're not using the opportunity that such changes warrant in terms of trying to paint a different picture. At the moment, the premise for independence economically, as posited by the No campaign by Better Together, is that we couldn't possibly do all the things that the UK currently does. We couldn't be as a successful economy as the UK supposedly is. But I don't understand why we don't want to try and kind of delineate clear tartan water, if you like, between Scotland as an independent nation and the UK, because actually one of the reasons for wanting independence is because we don't want to be like the UK. And, our economy could be very different. And the reason the UK is in the mess that it's in is because it's never learned to live within its means. And even just starting from that kind of founding principle of we will be a different kind of country. We will not be kind of, investing huge amounts of borrowed money in paying for an arms trade, for nuclear weapons, but that we would shape a different economy. Scotland would be a thrifty nation. We would live within our means. And so these kind of issues actually wouldn't really arise because we're not talking about being a dominating world power or at least trying to cling on to the vestiges of that. What we want to be is just a country that looks after our own well and plays our role internationally in terms of contributing to the wealth and development of other nations.
I think that's an interesting point there, Kate, and I wonder if I could ask maybe Michael about that. I mean, you raised there before about this is a kind of unionist scare story which has been undermined, I suppose, by events, dear boy, events. And in some ways, doesn't this indicate the extent to which this whole referendum campaign, well, yes, the kind of issues that Kate's talking about are going to be important, about fundamental choices about message, about what kind of argument we make for independent Scotland, kind of in parallel, there's going to be the run of all of these events, external things out of our control, which are going to undermine the kind of yes campaign and the no campaign, actually. And that's quite an interesting factor, I think, the kind of bitch goddess Fortuna, and who's she going to smile on in this campaign? And I think today this A rating thing certainly is not a beaming smile on the Better Together campaign.
Yeah, and everyone seems to be jumping on the next little thing. So the AAA campaign, this was a Better Together thing. On the nationalist side, everyone's jumping on, all right, this is our opportunity, this is great, it shows they're liars. Whereas actually, if anyone listens to the economists and the people who, well, I'm not actually sure economists do know what they're talking about, but let's say the people who do work in this sector, they've been quite consistent saying it doesn't actually matter that much. I really agree with Kate about how we need to be working on thinking of a different form of economy. And although Kate said the Labour plan and Ed Balls, but I mean, he still agreed to 80% of the cuts in their plan. They're still talking about carrying on with 80% of the cuts. So that's kind of undermines Labour's position a bit as well. Back to the independent Scotland idea, it's about creating a different kind of economy. It seems like we're still not got to the crunch. Everybody's too quick to jump and start scoring points at the moment.
Yeah, and I would perhaps sympathise with that. And it seems to me that if this Triple E thing, I can see why it's fun. I see why it's fun to say, this is critical for Danny Alexander 1 minute and peripheral for him on the other minute. I think that's an important argument to make. But frankly, I mean, I am not very au fait with Moody's ratings of sovereign debt, and I suspect if I'm not, then most people are. So I don't wonder how much impact really even this kind of modest debating society victory would really have in terms of public consciousness. Whereas maybe the kind of things that Kate's saying might actually do so.
Sorry, just another thing. I thought Carolyn Leckie tweeted earlier. I thought it was excellent. Well, I didn't think it was excellent, but it was very true that probably Osborne will use this as an excuse to inflict further damage on the poor.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Okay, well, moving from perhaps one issue about the independence referendum to another slightly, I'm sure both of you saw this week that in Glasgow University they held a sort of ad hoc referendum of their own on the whole independence question, which produced a mighty 10% turnout, a 38% yes vote and a 62% no vote in terms of Scottish independence. This has got quite a lot of coverage in the press, and certainly I think it would be fair to say that Yes Scotland seemed to flirt with it quite significantly. And while 38% is not bad, it's not great. I wondered, Kate, some people were suggesting that it was a rather bad, unstrategic idea